When people think of large atmospheric slaughter WODs, they often think of maps like Miasma and Swim with the Whales Map 3, maybe Abandon. As they should, these are all great WODs. But a WOD that rarely seems to make the list and is at the top of mine is Eden by RD. I've loved this WOD ever since I first ran through it many years ago, and it's one of the first WODs that comes to my mind when people ask me about things to play. If you've never heard of this WOD, then I want to talk you through some of the aspects that make it special, and use this as a bit of an excuse to pinpoint why I enjoy it so much myself. So, this is why you should play Eden. The first thing you experience in Eden is its hot start. You're enclosed in this little wooden structure that's full of zombies and a couple of revs and manx that gradually gets more populated as you pick up weapons and armor. Such a dynamic opening, with combat that can be approached in a staggered manner via picking up one weapon and then dealing with the new arrivals slowly, or you can release everything at once and just thrive in the chaos. Eden was a big influence on Map 10 of Haste in terms of aesthetics and gameplay, and the waves of zombies at the beginning that are released when you pick up the armor and chain guns stem directly from this. It also influenced Fractured Worlds Map 1, where vials are released for each major item you pick up, and it sort of forces you to route your pickups a little bit to avoid getting swarmed. Eden's opening presents you with a lot of choices as a player, and the combat in the WOD overall is very loose. It doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. There isn't a fixation on having fights be mechanically complex or be completely unique. There's obviously something to be said for complicated voodoo setups to create fights that operate as combat puzzles to be figured out, but Eden has simple slaughter gameplay that is nice and loose, allowing you to mix up your strategies and approach them at different times during the map. For instance, this little grove fight with the two cyber demons, it can be accessed very early on, potentially with just the plasma gun that you get in the fight itself. And it's perfectly doable this way, but you can also come back later on with rockets and the BFG and tackle the fight in a simpler way, at the cost of not having the plasma gun for the other sections of the map. The great thing about Eden is that it can be approached in a wide variety of ways, thanks to how open the level design is, and exploration rewards you with the ability to make these choices. The punishment never feels too great for straying from the expected path, and all routes seem viable. Eden also isn't too difficult. The map isn't trying to break your balls the entire time, and it occupies a really enjoyable niche that not a lot of slaughter type WODs aim for, in that it has a lot of monsters and a bit of bite, but it's also a more relaxing kind of romp for an experienced player. The mournful, fantasy, MIDI and dreamy aesthetics of the WOD help to make Eden a soothing experience as well. There are subtle changes to the play palette to mute Doom's blue range and pump up the saturation on the green slightly, as well as some minor tweaks to the red and pink ranges. These palette changes really amplify the organic areas of the WOD, which use a small number of textures to great effect. The little hills and cliffs look a lot more lush, and the purple and blue, blurple tones in the oceans and sky give a more otherworldly feeling to the spaces. Structures in the opening area are made of metal and wood, with a mixture of vanilla textures and some taken from other texture packs like Community Chest 4. Detailing is simple and effective, with dotted islands floating like wreckage in the map's seas and curious stone obelisks among the plants and foliage. RD offers up some nice little Doomcube moments as well, like returning this book to an alien floating library, and a little custom scroll sprite replacing the computer map power-up. Small additions and moments like this to create a sense of backstory for the world and make the game space more enjoyable to spend time in. There are a few extra sprites thrown into the mix as well, with little trees dotted around the map for extra greenery and water spouts that add some motion to the spaces. And that's another thing this map has in abundance, is motion. A lot of challenge WODs these days, mine included, have monster encounters structured out into pockets of combat, with even incidental WODs having a lot of monsters that teleport in or raise from the ground, emerge from monster closets. There's a reason for this obviously, in that in Doom, monsters are constantly wanting to move to the player's position, which means if you have loose monsters in your map, they tend to clump up in ways that can make combat dull or messy. Open encounters also allow for players to run away from or cheese encounters more easily, so especially in slaughter WODs, it's common to lock the player into these encounters. What Eden manages to do with its monster placement is to have a lot of the map already populated and roaming. When you enter the main area of the map, much of the space is filled with monsters, and it gives the feeling that this is a place you are intruding on, that the monsters are naturally here, and it gives a great sense of movement and life to the WOD. It also means that as you're roaming around the map and everything's alerted, you can feel the presence of monsters occupying the space at all times, and it helps to ground the abstract space into something more tangible and lived in. Once you enter the main section of the map, teleporters will start to go off and bulk out the area with extra monsters. It does make your initial entrance a little bit of a panic. Once you get a foothold though, the combat feels loose and manageable. There are packs of revs and roaming vials, but there's plenty of space and cover to tackle everything in chunks. Once you grab the green key from its ethereal water world, you'll be faced with the main challenge of the map, as teleporters once again fill the outside waterways with vials, revenants, and other friends. Again, this feels daunting on a first playthrough, but once you learn to rush the BFG and make an initial push into a cluster of vials, you can tangle with a pack of revs and you'll find that a lot of the WOD's major encounter is cleanup. While cleanup is often a dirty word in Doom encounter design, I actually love how organic this entire section feels, with some large central spaces that are interconnected to allow the monsters to flow through. On my first playthrough, I remember being too afraid to tackle the bulk of the monsters head on, so I just kind of let them clump up in this main cave and whittled them down completely inefficiently, as the vials continuously resurrected monsters and my supplies dwindled. What's nice is that you can also just leave if you want to once you have the green key, but you'll have to manage a timed sequence of arch vials that'll likely slow you down enough that that main mob will follow you into the exit room. The combat design in this sense promotes movement and offensive gameplay without forcing it, and this looser style of slaughter is something I aspire to work into my own maps more, among the tied encounters that I tend to favour. Eden certainly has more structured encounters as well, with the grove fight that I mentioned earlier, a fun little rocket fight with a bunch of vials that can easily catch you off guard, and this fight in the centre of the starting area that's much easier with the BFG, but can be a bit tight if you go into it with only the SSG. Honestly, even with rockets it can get a little bit spicy. I love how cleanly this fight is built into the middle of the map and that you can access it via a few different little jumps. I still don't know the intended way to get into the fight, and that's extremely cool to me. A little while ago I recorded a very slow demo for this WOD, and in it I do another little step up and hop out of the arena at the beginning so I can get the rocket launcher and eventually BFG a bit more quickly. And once again, I'm not sure if this is where you're supposed to get out of the area, as there are multiple spots you can jump out of. It's very cool to me that progression feels like you're doing something you're not supposed to here, and gives you a great sense of agency as the player. The entire opening section is built from beautiful, clean line work that leads to simplistic vistas and structural geometry that gives the feeling of a sparse, ethereal sea on some distant world. All this is brought to life with the somber fantasy vibes produced by the map's MIDI. A lot of what makes a Slaughter WOD an enjoyable experience is how much you get out of being in the map's environments. With Eden, Artie has created a world that's pleasurable to explore, roam around aimlessly, and kill swaths of monsters in. If I had one gripe with Eden, it's that it uses the default title pick and intermission pick, as custom imagery would help to keep you immersed in the atmosphere from start to finish. But that's such a minor quibble that it won't affect your experience at all unless you're completely pedantic like I am. Eden is one of my favourite Doom WODs, and I urge you to check it out, and for speedrunners to pick up the map and get some better UVMax demos out there than my terrible one, as I think this map is fun and actually a really comfy map to run. I love this WOD, and it manages to present a lot of my favourite aspects of the Slaughter genre in a really tight package. It's got dreamlight abstract visuals, a peaceful MIDI juxtaposed with killing hordes of monsters, and a loose open approach to combat that I hope to see more of in modern challenge WODs. Rather than some rambling closing statement about the WOD though, I think I'll just give Archie the final word on Eden, as I think his post in the original Doom WOD thread sums it up very nicely.